Hi, welcome everybody to another What's Possible Bite-sized session. Excellent. Hopefully you can see me now as well. I'm Martin. I'm the CEO of the Specialist Works, and it's, as ever, an absolute pleasure to have you join us for what will be 45 very interesting minutes this week. What's Possible is founded on the principle that time is precious and you need to get to the good stuff really quickly. So that's what we're going to give you today. Very excited that we've got a friend of the Specialist Works in the shape of Lord Mark Price joining us. What he doesn't know about business, the business of government and retail in particular, is really not worth knowing. So I'm going to hand over to Mark, who's going to run a really interesting session for us today. And thanks as ever for giving us 45 minutes. We'll make sure you get value from it. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Good afternoon. My name is Mark Connolly. I'm the Client Success Director at the Specialist Works. As Martin said, we have Lord Mark Price with us today on screen now. Just before we jump into this, today's session is slightly different in the fact that we are basically going to have a fireside chat for the next 45 minutes. There's two parts to the conversation. I'll introduce Mark in a second, but he runs an organisation called Engaging Works, Engaging Business.
Yeah.
We will talk about that and how the happiness in the workplace is important and how the companies that we're all going through these changes right now can make differences. And then we'll have a conversation around his experience, both as Deputy Chair of the John Lewis Partnership and also Minister of State, which leads on nicely to his bio introduction, which I'll give in a second. As always, the session is muted so that you guys can hear the conversation going on. But please, Mark has been really supportive on this point, which is any questions, there's nothing off the table. Please, in the question box, put as many questions in there as you want, and I will collate them together and ask as many as I can of Mark in the 45 minutes that we've been allocated. As usual, this will be recorded and accessed via our YouTube channel, which we can share with you afterwards. But so to introduce today's guest, Mark started his career at the John Lewis Partnership as a graduate trainee in 1982. By 2005, he had joined the board, and in 2007 he was appointed Managing Director of Waitrose. Under his leadership, Waitrose stores increased from 183 to 346, and he became the Deputy Chairman of the John Lewis Partnership. He was appointed Commander of the Royal Victorian Order in 2014 New Year's Honours for his work with the business and community and the Prince's Countryside Fund. In 2016, Mark was appointed the UK Minister of State for Trade and Investment and was made a life peer, becoming the Right Honourable the Lord Price. He left the government to pursue his writing and business interests and remains an active member of the House of Lords. In 2018, Lord Price joined Fair Trade UK as Chair of the Board of Trustees, and he's the founder of Engaging Works, a groundbreaking new service to transform businesses by helping employees to be happier. To date, he has published 5 books, ranging from a children's book through to food, picnic guides and business books as well. So nobody more qualified to talk to us about the retail sector, the impact of COVID on business, and obviously from your ministerial role, cheekier questions will be coming regarding the post-Brexit world that we now live with here in the UK. But first, so thank you for joining us, Mark.
My pleasure.
It's an absolute honour to be talking to you. I said we're going to be sort of breaking this into 2 sections. So I know you are incredibly passionate about happiness, well-being of employees. So let's start around that. Let's talk about Engaging Works and Engaging Business. So what is that all about in terms of a business proposition?
So it really goes back to my time in the John Lewis Partnership. One of the unique things about the John Lewis Partnership is it was founded over 100 years ago by a chap who decided that the supreme purpose of the organisation should be the happiness of the people that work there. And he had this really straightforward idea that if people are happy, then they're going to give more. we'll have lower staff turnover, lower sickness, high levels of productivity. Our customers will get better service because we'll be able to train our people more. Because our customers get better service, over the long term, we'll have a sustainable business. So that sort of simple thought set up the John Lewis Partnership. I then spent, as you have said, a long time in the John Lewis Partnership, 34 years. And so during that time, I tried to understand in practice, what does that actually mean? What does it look like to have a happy workforce? And when I left, I wrote a book called Fairness for All, and it sets out both in principle, but also in practice, how you achieve that, with examples not just from John Lewis, but through all the organizations that I'd come across. So having published that book, I decided that I'd build a website called Engaging Works, where any individual in the world can go, take a quick survey based on the things that I had discovered were most important for driving engagement and happiness at work. At the end of the survey, which takes 7 minutes, it gives people practical advice on what they can do to be happier at work. And all of the academic research, and there's lots of it now, you can find lots online, says that organizations with happy, contented, engaged workforces are more profitable, are more productive, have higher earnings per share, have lower sick absence, etc., etc. So my great plan was to try and help people all over the world do that. And we've now had hundreds of thousands of people in 134 countries take the survey. And so we've built up this huge database. And then at the same time, or slightly afterwards, I built Engaging Business to help businesses do the same. While I was at John Lewis, we used a very large and well-known organisation to do our annual survey, staff survey. But there were a number of things about it that I just didn't feel were particularly helpful to me. One, I got no comparative industry data, so I wanted to know how we were doing at Waitrose against our competitor set, say Sainsbury's and Tesco et al., but it didn't do that. It only gave me my results against the last survey. It didn't give feedback to individuals. It wasn't instantaneous. The results came out about 2 months after we'd actually finished. So I wanted to do something with instant results, and I wanted it to be super flexible. We talked to the whole workforce once a year in April, but I would have liked the ability to set up surveys for new managers and different units. So I built Engaging Business to do all of that, to give individual feedback as well as company feedback, to give comparative industry data because I collect it all from around the world, and to be super flexible. So that's the background to what we do. It's helping organizations and companies be more engaged and, as a consequence, to be more successful.
Fantastic. And we've got our first question come in, which is what we asked for. How do you feel about today's announcement that John Lewis's staff may not get their usual bonuses?
Well, through the course of my 34 years, there were good years and there were less good years. People often used to say to me, oh, the bad years when, bonuses are much lower or there's no bonus are the most difficult to manage. I actually found the reverse. I found that when things were difficult and you said, look, we're not making as much profit, we're going to have a lower bonus, it galvanized people to want to do better. I found that in the really successful years, people would say, what, only 20%? So it's how you manage those circumstances. But a lot of people get hung up with the John Lewis Partnership's success that it's enjoyed for many years is all around the bonus and paying the bonus. I think it's about more than that. And I sort of set these things out both in the survey and the book. But there are 6 things that really drive workplace happiness and satisfaction. Pay is certainly one. You have to feel you're being fairly paid. More important is recognition, being told you're doing a good job. And we're awful at that in the UK. On average in the UK, we praise people once every 4 and a bit months. We actually criticise twice a week. So recognition is more important in driving happiness and commitment. Information, having the information to do your job, feeling as though you've got the space to do your job and then you can be recognised for it, feeling that your company cares for your well-being, feeling a sense of pride in what you do and the organisation you work for, and lastly, the relationship you have with your line manager, and also whether you feel you're being developed. Those are the things that are most important. So happiness at work for me isn't sort of airy-fairy concept. it's about being rooted in real things that drive people's commitment in the workplace. So from a John Lewis perspective, all of those other things are there. They won't have, obviously, as high bonuses as they've used to have, but they should be using it, and I'm sure they are, to say to all of their people, you know, what can we do to get back to where we were?
Yeah, I mean, that segues fantastically. And I think just as a stopgap there for people that are listening to this, you highlighted 6 things which are absolutely crucial to staff and employee well-being and value. And I think if you go to your Engaging Works website, all of that is available on the front page in terms of the information of what those 6 things are. So rather than getting them on screen, people can go and find out about those because they're all there. I think doing a nice segue though, using that question as a bounce pad, is that the good years and the bad years. Now this year, for a gazillion reason and for one reason, is a very unique year. And I know that you do a lot of surveys and insights around regular feedback from employees as to how they feel against those 6 points. But what data is there about COVID and working from home that you've found over the last few months that you could share with us today?
So I'm glad that you gave me the heads up to this question, Mark. I've got a few slides to share with you all on research we've done. So I'll click on to slides and we will go to the first slide. So if you go to Engaging Business, this is what the homepage looks like. And as you said, if you go to Engaging Business or Engaging Works, we've got live data every day by sector, by country, for how people are feeling. But we've done a lot of work quite recently on how people are feeling through COVID. One of the biggest bits of research we did was with the Chartered Management Institute, but also with another 10 organisations where we built up a database, I think, of something like 9,000 respondents. And the good news is that people are feeling happier working from home. So our average score over this period was about 65% for people who were going to the workplace, but it was 72% for people that were in work. And if you look at the 6 steps, what you will see is that on every dimension that I talked about, reward and recognition, information sharing, empowerment, well-being, instilling pride and job satisfaction, home workers scored higher on every single dimension. So for whatever reason, people are feeling happier being at work than they were going into work. So let me give you a bit of a breakdown of that. So first of all, just looking at data around well-being, the less good news is that about 37% of employees either felt anxious or depressed at work, and men felt more anxious than women at work. Employees in travel, leisure, and the entertainment industries felt most neglected, and we've got a breakdown over 26 different industries. Construction and real estate, might surprise you, felt that their well-being was being most cared for. Millennials fall below the average for organisations when asked about well-being, so more so than non-millennials. And also millennials were most likely to feel depressed at work. And employees in management roles, more than those in non-management roles, were more likely to feel depressed in their work. So there's some, and I can share these slides with you afterwards. So there's a lot of data around well-being and how people are feeling. But in terms of the working from home data, first thing, as I said, the home workers are happier, 72% to 65%. There's a really big shift now, people saying that when the lockdown ends, they're really happy to work from home. So 66% of all people said they'd either like to work permanently or for a few days from home. Most of those said, I'd like to split my week 50-50 in the office and in home. And there was only 8% who just said, we want a full-blown return to the workplace. Home workers felt better paid, as I said earlier. That must be something to do with not having commute costs or costs at work. So that's one of the reasons that's driving this sort of sentiment about feeling happier at home. People do miss working with their colleagues. So non-managers more so than managers, but people do miss working with their colleagues. Millennials, again, even more so. So younger people are really missing being at work and the social contact. Women feel more isolated than men. And in the research we've done, that's a lot to do with childcare and a lot to do with other responsibilities that our respondents say they're taking on. And the last thing is that people feel more productive. Managers feel a lot more productive, but also non-managers feel more productive. So within the survey, there's a lot of good news about how people are feeling about working from home and their happiness there. The two things really that are coming out as negatives are they're missing the social aspects of work and also career development. People are missing their career development. So if you're looking to get your workforce back, those are the two things that you should be amplifying on a return to work. So those were the highlights that we had.
Fantastic. Well, that's already generated questions. So let me try and fire through these. I think just to say there, though, rather than people trying to scribble down all of those notes, the marketing team here at the Specialist Works can share that information, if that's okay with you, to the people that have turned up today. So I think you've addressed this anyway, but I want to ask it because how different do you think employees and specifically managers will behave post-lockdown? Do you think there will be a fundamental shift? And do you think consumers' shopping behaviour will be different? Actually, let's park the consumer shopping bit because we'll come to that in the second part of this. But in terms of employees and managers, how do you think they will change, especially based on that data that you've just shared with us?
So I think the first thing to say is that the people piece has gone to the top of the agenda. So if you think about the amount of time senior managers have spent thinking about their people over the last 3 months, their well-being, keeping them informed, giving them the information, trusting them to get on and do things, that's of a different order of thought, I suspect, for most organisations than they've had previously. And in a way, that's why people are responding positively to our working from home survey. If you go to Engaging Works, we give you a choice of doing a working from home survey or a working from work survey. And it's that mixture of things that I've gone through has made people feel my organisation cares for my well-being. My organisation is giving me lots of information. I feel better rewarded. So there's lots of good news in there about how the employee feels. My instinct is that when we go back, how employees then will want to be continued to be treated will be as important. You know, they're still going to feel nervous for a while yet about COVID and commuting and a whole host of things. So I think that's how are your people feeling? How connected are they? Do they have any information to do the job? Do they feel empowered? All of those things are going to become more important. What's interesting is they were really important in any event for under a 29-year-old. So in all the research we do as a group, they look for a different level of commitment from their organisations. They don't, and I'm generalising wildly, but they don't take the view that work is work and home is home. They genuinely take the view that I want a work-life balance, and if I'm not happy, I'm going to go and move on and do something else. The older generation were far more about, you know, I'm looking for stability, I'm looking for security, I want to be here for a good deal of time, you know, work's work, and it wouldn't be called work if it wasn't really work. So there's a real distinction in age groups in the research that we do about how younger people want to be treated and how they want to feel about being in a business compared to an older group of people. The one thing I ought to add as a caveat to that, in all of our research, there is a real issue with men in their mid-40s to mid-50s. And the real issue is around career development and feeling as though they've been left on the shelf. And so the world around them is changing. They can see that happening. And they have some real concerns about, am I going to be developed? Am I going to be able to, you know, have a job and do the things I've always done? I don't feel that I'm going to be equipped for this new world. So as well as millennials looking for career development, there's this another big segment of people who tend to be men, mid-40s up to mid-50s.
Well, thank you for that. As a man that turns 50 next week, I appreciate the insight. So it's okay. On a serious side, though, I think there are some really interesting things in that statement around how different groups feel differently treated and valued. And I think there's a great question here from Chloe at Toolstation, which is, that's all well and good, but how do you really make people a priority in a business when ultimately it sometimes feels that profits trump people?
So, I mean, what I try to do, Chloe, in my book, but also if you go to the website, is to try and explain why if you put your people first, then you get the right outcome. Richard Branson does loads of good work in this space with Virgin, but there are a number of others as well. And in the book, I talk about Unipart and a whole host of companies that have got a similar philosophy. When I first started going to business schools in the mid-90s, early mid-90s, the mantra then is very much about, it's about maximising shareholder return. All we're focused on is driving profit, and that's the be-all and end-all. Over the last 25 years or so, 30 years or so, that's changed. And so now you get business schools talking about you need to be customer-centric. If you focus on making your customers happy, then you'll get the best commercial results. But a number now are going much further, and they're saying, actually, it probably does start with the employees. If your employees are fired up, if they're engaged, if they're happy, if they think they're doing something worthwhile, if they think the organisation cares for them, then they are going to give more, which is going to lead to higher levels of customer service. So there's lots of research now, Chloe, that says it all starts with employees, the right employees who are really motivated. Now, what you can do is drive short-term results by, being really hard, by saying to people, if you don't perform, you're out the door, da-di-da-di-da. But the reality is that will only work in the short term, because what you'll have is high levels of staff turnover, lower levels of training, unhappy people, and you won't achieve the results. So my personal experience for many years, but also now all of the research says, if you want a starting point to drive high levels of customer service, start with thinking about your people and how they feel and how they can be better motivated.
Great. So to that, do you think happiness is always the right thing to measure, particularly during the challenging times? Fulfillment, doing the right thing and being challenged can overtake the need for happiness. What are your thoughts on that? That's probably linked to the last question, but.
So if the house is on fire, you don't have a debate. You have to get out. And there are times when businesses, as they're doing now, have to think about how do we become more efficient. My view would always be that when you do that, you try and involve your people in those discussions so that they've got a context to operate in. So it's not the wrong thing to do, but it's about how you choose to do it. So I think that if you're going to measure commercial performance, one of the things that I always would want to look at is what's our staff turnover? What's our longevity? How long have people stayed for? How experienced are they? How much training do they have? How can they therefore best deliver? So I think that if you start with thinking about we need really good people who are really motivated, who are going to stick around for quite a time, then you think, well, how do you achieve that? And that's where you come back to, well, these are the six things that achieve that. They need to feel fairly paid. They need to feel that when they do something well, you recognise them. They need to have the information, to do their job, but also some context for doing their job in terms of the wider organisation. They need to feel that they've got the space to go and do their job, that they're empowered, and that they're respected to do their job. They need to feel that the organisation cares for them. One of my favourite ever quotes is from Theodore Roosevelt, who said, "Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care." So they need to feel that the organisation has their best interests at heart. They need to feel that they're doing something worthwhile. I'm making a difference. My organisation have a really strong bond with their manager. 83% of people leave businesses because they do not have a good relationship with their manager. People work for great companies, but they leave because they don't have a good relationship with their manager. So that's pretty fundamental in making sure that people are happy at work. And then the last bit is career development. Am I being developed here? Am I learning new things? And, part of that is the conversation, again, that you're going to have with your line manager about how can I be better? How can I do more? How can I earn more? How can I be recognized more? So for me, those six things are not, as I said at the start, airy-fairy. They're actually hard-nosed. And it's those things that drive individual commitment that leads to sustained and hopefully improved personal performance.
Brilliant, and thank you for that. There's a lot of stats in there which I'm sure we can take out from this and again share afterwards, so that they're not lost in this conversation. So there's two other questions which I think you've just touched on, which are linked together, which I really do want to ask though, because it's a really important question around leadership. What role does leadership play in making a good workplace? And I think you've just given stats around that. And the second question is a more personal, direct question for you, which is, was there any particular person or manager that suddenly galvanized you into the real benefits of having a happier workplace?
So give me the first one again, Martin, because as soon as you said the second one, I started thinking about that.
No, the first question was the role of leaders in making a great workplace.
Well, it's hugely important. It's important that you have a leader who wants to see the team develop and grow. I often felt that there were a number of steps to being a really successful leader. The first one is that you just need the practical experience to do the job. You need to know what you're talking about to have the credibility. The second thing is that you then have to be able to galvanize the team, all over the top together. So that kind of ability to do that. A lot of people think that that's enough. And I can remember a very, very talented manager I worked with who was very good at the first two. But in getting things done, smashed on a lot of eggshells. And this manager said to me, "I want to be on the board." And they said to me, "Look, if you just tell everybody to do what I say, we could get loads done." And I explained to them that actually you can't do that. That if I wanted to buy a property when I was running Waitrose, I couldn't demand people sell me the property. I had to woo them. And so the great lesson in the end is that to be an effective leader, people have to do things because they want to do them. You have to be able to demonstrate to them why it's important. They have to see the benefits for them in taking any particular course of action. And it's really important that then when you do something, you celebrate it as the team. You're there to help the team be great. The team aren't there to make you great. So for me, the great leaders I worked with were always able to do that. I always knew that they'd have great experience and wisdom and advice. They knew what to do. I always knew that, when the chips were down, they'd be there saying, "Come on, we've got to sort this out." But also I knew that they'd be talking about, how do I help the team achieve this? So yes, I think leadership is hugely important. In terms of great leaders, I was hugely lucky. I had a number. Probably the one that made the greatest difference to me was my first managing director, a guy called Brian O'Callaghan in Southampton in 1982. And 5 graduates started in the John Lewis in Southampton. I can remember that I was the last one to be promoted to the most junior level. I wasn't happy. I went to see the managing director got to hear I wasn't happy, called me to see him, sat me in the office and asked me what was it all about. And I said to him that I felt I'd worked really hard and that I was a bit frustrated that I hadn't been promoted. And he said to me, "Look, Mark, you judge a career not over a day or a week or a year or 5 years, you judge it over a career." And he said, "If you work hard and keep your head down and look after your people, then the cream will rise to the top." And from that date, Mark, I never asked for a promotion. I've never asked for a job from 1984. I just did the best I could do. I worked hard, and I did everything I could to support the people in my team, have the information they needed, and to have the confidence that they needed to be the best that they could be. And it was through them and through a good dose of luck that I built my career over a long time. So it was really through that I got the insights that, it is about the team. It's about doing those 6 things I've talked about with the team, paying them fairly, recognizing them when they do things really well, making sure that they really know what's going on, making sure that they are really highly trained in the job that they've got, trusting them to do the job, coaching them when they get it not right, not telling them off for getting it wrong, making them realize that I really cared about them as individuals, making sure that they knew that whatever they were doing was really important to the organization, making sure that they were being developed all the time. So by just focusing on those 6 things all the time, I got to understand in a very practical sense what happiness meant. It's not about ping pong tables. It's not about pizza nights. It's not about all that. Socializing is important. Of course, it's great to be with people, but they are not in and of themselves the thing that drives happiness at work.
We were asking about was the shape of the likely recession, and you were just about to say that you were very optimistic about what it's going to look like. So if we could carry on from there, that would be.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. I mean, I wouldn't say very optimistic. I think I said I was more on the optimistic side of things. And I think the reasons for optimism are that in May, personal debt was paid down by 4.7 billion because obviously people couldn't go out and spend. And so there is a degree of income that's been saved. If I look at what's happening around the rest of the world, if I look at data from China, then they've where they were. Data that I've got from hospitality businesses open now in the UK is that without being able to eat in, they're at sales of 80% of where they were pre-closure. Talking to people this week who are based in Brussels and Paris, they said it's like it's never been locked down. People are out and about and, spending again, and it's hard to believe they had COVID. So those are all reasons that you would feel optimistic. I think that so much now depends, though, on what people decide to do over the next few months. If people stay at home and they don't spend money, then clearly that's going to create issues for the economy. If they go back and spend the money that they've got, then there's a higher probability that this will be V-shaped. So I'm sort of cautiously optimistic that there's the potential to see a V-shape, and certainly given what organisations are doing around cost management, then there's the potential probably a year from now to see some pretty strong both sales and profit growth.
So part of that, though, I think, as you and I were talking before, which is that a lot of that will depend on the individual people, the consumers themselves. And, there's been some pros around the last few months. We've all got a few more pennies in our pocket because we're not traveling, we're not out spending, we're not at restaurants, we're not in hotels, we're not traveling. And yet the other side of that is around jobs uncertainty and economic challenges. I mean, do we talk ourselves into a recession sometimes? And, do we talk ourselves into a recession sometimes?
Well, there's certainly the possibility to do that. If the news channels are going to cover the redundancy programs as the headline news every day, then that's going to make people feel less confident. Although it's happening and they should report it, it's the prominence that they decide to give to the effects of COVID. So, yes, it can be self-perpetuating, or on the other hand, people can just say, I've been locked up for 3 months. I'm going to try and take a holiday in the UK. I'm going to go out. I'm going to buy X, Y, and Z. And it's a bit, simplistically, it's a bit like a double espresso or a diamond. If you were always going to buy your other half a diamond ring and you've not been able to do that because the shops aren't open, then you can go and do that. So that's demand that's probably there that's going to come back again. All those double espressos that you may have bought over the last 3 months but couldn't because the local coffee shop wasn't open, they've gone to the economy. So because of that, it's really hard to know what amount of the economy is pent up. Are car sales pent up? Is travel pent up? Is sofa purchasing pent up? Is large white goods pent up? So are we going to see all of that unleashed now as people can go back, or is it lost to the economy forever? So I think that the hope is that some of it is pent up, and it's that starts to release. And so what we start seeing from the next few months on is a higher level of sales as people start to recoup, businesses start to recoup. But the truth is, nobody knows. On the basis of the intelligence that I have from international customers, and on the basis of what I've seen about personal finance and the commitment of the government to keep the furlough scheme going until October, plus other measures that I think they might have up their sleeves to try and help boost the economy, I'm more in the optimistic side than I am the pessimistic side about, what things are going to look like over a 6 to 12 month period. But who knows?
And sort of linked to that, I think, we've certainly seen it with a lot of our client partners and read about it a lot in the trade press, that COVID has actually accelerated many retailers specifically looking at their omni-channel transformation. So we've seen an awful lot of advertisers shift their brand direct to consumer, mail out, opportunities for click and collect or appointments to shopping. I mean, does that clearly demonstrates the ability for businesses to transform their business even under the most dire challenges out there, even if the shops are actually physically shut? A lot of brands have changed their communication strategy and delivery strategy for their products. Do you think this is something we're going to carry on doing, or do you think we'll go back to how it was 4 or 5 months ago?
No. Well, they're going to carry on. I mean, as I was saying earlier, and I don't know if people listening caught it, but what we've seen is a growth of online over the last 3-4 months that arguably in some sectors could have taken 10 years to achieve. And the real debate is, will people go back? When you look at Boots doubling the number of prescription deliveries from 750,000 to 1.5 million and hiring another 500 people to deliver those subscriptions, you can't imagine those people are going to go back to walking to their local Boots to queue to get a prescription. And so on the one hand, you're teaching people to be savvier about shopping online, but you've just lost those people going into their local high street and walking into a Boots. So the trend that was there anyway, and there were a number of trends in retail, there was a trend about costs increasing, there was a trend about the strength of the discounters, but also, as everybody listening knows, there was an online trend. So that's just moved now at a huge rate of knots, and it's forcing businesses to move even more quickly to what things are going to be like going further. But it isn't just in retailing. In every single business, people need to sit back and say, how have my employees changed? How has the customer changed? What can we sell now that we couldn't sell before, and vice versa? And the really smart businesses focus on doing that. It's, how has the world now changed, and where can we adapt ourselves to be successful in the new world?
Fantastic, thank you. And I think there's a lot of actionable things in there which all of the people listening now can take away and use. And it would be remiss of me not to sort of finish on a final question from your experience as a Minister of State for International Trade and Development and Negotiations. I'm not going to ask you how did those conversations go, because I need to limit the amount of time we've got left on this. But the question is, where do you see, how do you see personally the UK in the world in the next few years in terms of the ability to be able to free trade, to have different relationships with different countries, to be able to change some of the laws which we've obviously been responsible for from a business perspective under the European Union relationship that we've had? What advice would you give to advertisers listening right now of the advantages and opportunities that they can take full advantage of as we come out of our previous relationship with the European Union?
So, I mean, to try and keep it short for you, Mark, I just think what people sort of miss is that the real issue around our trade talks with the EU and what will happen going forward is that the UK government do not want to be constrained by European EU conventions. So the UK government want the ability to be able to set their own independent tax rates, to be able to support industries they want to support, to offer incentives to industries to come into the UK that they'd like to come into the UK. The EU, for obvious reasons, doesn't want that. The EU doesn't want the UK to offer preferential terms for businesses to set up here and then trade into Europe. So everything is around those freedoms. So what the EU will do in their negotiations is everything possible to say, look, we'll give you a good trade deal as long as you comply with state aid rules, as long as you comply with current VAT rules, corporate tax rules, etc., etc. So that in a nutshell is the real debate. And I think that the UK would rather prioritise having the freedom to do those things over necessarily getting complete alignment with the EU. And the average tariffs with the EU are 2.5%. So 2.5% on the cost of goods, they'll think could be offset by a drop in corporation tax or a 2.5% drop in VAT. And there are other ways that they can mitigate it so the consumer would be no worse off. But over the long term, would give the UK an advantage. So just to give you one very practical example to understand how this works, George Osborne, when he was Chancellor, set up a scheme called the patent box scheme, where if you had your patent listed for a new product in the UK, you wouldn't pay corporation tax for 5 years. He launched it, but then he had to stop it because it fell foul of EU state aid rules. And it's that kind of thing that the UK will have the freedom to do. The UK can set policy to attract businesses to set up here and therefore to grow the economy. So that's where the real tug of love is between us and the EU. The EU know if they press too hard, then we will turn our attention away probably from the EU and look elsewhere. So again, I'm pretty ambivalent. I campaigned to remain and I voted to remain, and I felt that we'd done really well within the EU system. But it's not that I can't see some of the economic advantages of being outside if we play those things really smartly. So that's what your listeners should be watching out for, the extent to which the UK will either have or not have the freedoms to set its own fiscal strategies in the future, and to the extent to which they're traded off.
Fantastic. Mark, I can't thank you enough. That's a brilliant session, and I apologise for the technical challenges that we've had through this. So I'm conscious that we're a few minutes over, but I wanted to carry on just because of the tech glitch in the middle. So I thank you personally for your patience, and I thank everybody that's watching and listening for theirs, because it's not the screen that we wanted to share with you. We wanted to have a more lively visual debate as well as an audible one, but it is my absolute pleasure and honour to thank the Right Honourable the Lord Price for his time today. So thank you, Mark. I really appreciate that.
My pleasure.